All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back to the channel. All right, my favorite kind of video. We're going to talk about the fight business, and we're going to talk about this UFC lawsuit, okay? And I want to talk to you guys about some of the things that I heard the lawsuit plaintiffs talk about. I heard him on the Josh Thompson and John McCarthy show. This guy came on and he was talking about the lawsuit, and and basically what they're saying in the lawsuit is that the UFC has a monopoly on the sport, and so it's unfair to the fighters. The fighters never get to see what they're worth on the open market, and and basically the UFC is like suppressing fighter pay, etc., right? The same story that we've been hearing forever. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of the case enough to comment on the actual merits of the total case, but I want to talk about a specific example that he gave. And it was like one of the very first things that he said on the show. So obviously it's an example that he thinks holds merit. Like one of the main things, like think about this. This is why the lawsuit makes sense. And the example that he gave made no sense on his side. Like if I'm an impartial juror and you gave that example to me, the first thing that you said on this show, I would go, oh, there's a massive gap in your logic. Like an absolutely an untenable gap where I'm ruling against you out of the gate. If this is your big example, I'm ruling against you instantly. Okay. And I'll tell you exactly what that was. All right. So, oh, by the way, if you like the content, subscribe and ring the bell. And if you're already mad because you think the UFC has a monopoly and blah, 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 I'm not talking about the merits of the lawsuit necessarily because, again, I haven't read through all of it. I don't know the ins and outs of the UFC's books. I've talked about this a million times, okay? I need to see, if I was going to even have an opinion on what fighters get paid, I would need to see the books, okay? I'm a business guy, okay? I've run businesses. So, I would need to see how much revenue the UFC brings in, how much revenue goes out to the fighters, and then how much revenue goes to running the business, the Performance Institute, COVID testing, the arenas, all of the expenses that live around the UFC to make it work, okay? Because all these people that are like, oh, the fighters only get paid 18%. Okay, what does that have to do with anything? How much do they pay for all these other things that you are not thinking about because you're not a business person, okay? The fighters making 18%, cool. That's not enough information for you to have an opinion, okay? But let me go back to the original thing. So the guy came on to Josh Thompson and John McCarthy's show. And this is the example that he gave of why this is important, that this lawsuit goes through, right? Or goes their way. He's like, think about this, man. He's like, you never really get to see who the best fighters are because the UFC locks these guys in these super long contracts, And so as an example, the biggest fight that I can think of that we never got to see as a result of how the UFC does business was Randy Couture against Fedor Emelianenko, right? These guys wanted to fight. Fedor wanted to fight Randy. Randy wanted to fight Fedor. And at the time, the UFC asked Fedor to sign over all of his rights to do and get locked into a UFC contract, and he wouldn't do that, right? So Randy was like, okay, that's fine. I'll just retire and then I'll go fight Fedor in another organization. But no, because the UFC was like, no, you're not going to do that. And they had him locked into this contract. So he wasn't able to go test the free market and see what he's worth and then also get paid to fight Fedor and see who's the best in the world. That's not fair. We never got to see that fight. And Randy should have had the ability to go out and test the free market, and fight Fedor and get paid what he's worth, right? Okay, that was his big example. Now, where do you guys sit on that, right? Before I say anything, where do you guys sit? Now, I already told you I'm going to fucking annihilate that argument, but where do you sit? Just pretend I didn't say that. Does that make sense to you? That Randy should have been able to go out on the free market and fight Fedor for whatever he's worth. Some other organization or just a boxing promoter or that decides they want to do one MMA fight, they want to do Fedor against Randy Couture, who's the best in the world, right? Outside of UFC. Does that seems reasonable to you? That seems fair, right? Fair to Randy. Let's just look at Randy. Is that fair for Randy, right? No, it's not fucking fair at all, okay? It's not fair at all. Okay, yeah, it'd be super fair for Randy. Yeah, of course, Randy, gets everything he wants, okay? That's not how the world works. And the reason why it's not fair is because why is Randy such a big name that he could draw millions and millions of pay-per-view buys, okay? That's the point I've always tried to make with people. Stop thinking about fighters as human beings, okay? And I'm not trying to be insensitive, but the fighters are commodities and a part of a business, okay? They are commodities, right? And so in a commodities market, if a commodity or a business gains value because someone invested money and capital and time and effort into that commodity or that business, then the person or company that invested that money owns a part of them, right? Like, there deserves what comes back out of that investment, okay? Randy Couture was Randy Couture because the UFC, went in the hole $50 million building the company before they became successful. They also invested millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars promoting Randy Couture so that he became a household name, okay? The UFC did that, right? Like, the UFC did that. Think of the UFC as just one person. Like, so say it's Dana White with his own money, spends millions of dollars promoting Randy Couture, right? Now, Randy Couture needs to win the fights, of course, but the reason why him winning fights was visible to everyone is because the UFC poured money into that and promoted him. Like, this is the thing. The UFC spends money promoting fighters that can't draw on their own, right? That's why these big guys who can draw on their own feel like they're getting hosed, okay? Like, where they're like, yo, why don't I make as much as a boxer? Why am I only making this much? It's because the UFC is a machine that promotes fighters, okay? So when you get to the very, very top, yeah, it's true. You on the free market could go make more money, but the only reason that you're at the top is because the UFC spends so much money creating the machine that elevated you to the top, okay? So if you're seriously blind to why that Randy Couture makes no sense, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're not thinking about it like a business person. And I'm not even talking like, a business like cutthroat capital. I'm just talking about what's fair. Like, that would not be fair to the UFC or to Dana or anybody else. They built him up. Like, they spent the money to create Randy Couture. How would it be fair for him to go, thanks for that, now I'm going to leave the UFC, we're going to put on the biggest fight ever, and the UFC is not going to make any money on this fight? It's ridiculous. It's fucking stupid. It's an idiotic argument, okay? Makes no sense. And again, I am not saying that is not merit to other parts of the lawsuit. And at the same time, the entire sport exists because of the UFC, because these guys went in the hole. 50 million. People are like, oh, the UFC, they bought him for $2 million and now it's worth, $10 billion. Okay, yeah, that. And then they also spent another $50 million having no idea if it was ever going to be successful, And then when it became successful, yeah, then money started coming in. It started to become more profitable. They started doing more things. And now it's a profitable company. And now you have hundreds of professional UFC fighters that are getting, they're making, there's no one in the UFC who's not making six figures, annually. They have to fight 3 times a year. Okay. So everyone is making six figures to fight professionally. Okay. And some guys are making millions of dollars. It's not a bad deal. Okay. And I do understand the top guys who have elevated to the top, and they're looking at it like, look, I'm generating this much more revenue per pay. But look, those guys have figured out ways to get paid more, because if they're really that valuable to the UFC, when they hold out the UFC caves, Masvidal, Nate Diaz, Colby Covington, Conor McGregor, okay, they know who the needle pushers are. Guys who can push the needle on their own without the UFC machine. Those are the guys who end up getting paid a lot more. So, again, I just wanted to talk about that one example because I thought it was a perfect way to illustrate the gaps in their logic, okay? The Randy Couture versus Fedor thing, if you think that that's fair, to just let him go do this big fight, and then the UFC doesn't make any money from it, it's fucking ridiculous. It's not fair. It's not fair, okay? So, anyway, that's what I have for that. If you like the content, subscribe and ring the bell. Tell your friends. Peace.